So take time, we'll go to a Kahoot later. So today we'll be talking about the topic of critical appraisal. My name is Dr. Chen Kok-yong from the Department of Pharmacology. So why do we need to perform critical appraisal? Because all the information that you encounter in journal article, because reading journal article is a part and parcel of your postgraduate studies. So all informations in the journal article are not created equal. Because we are all human, okay? These include authors who wrote the article, editor who have who handled the publication of the article, and reviewers who actually vetted the article are all human. We all commit errors, and sometimes due to conflict of interest, financial interest, or maybe political interest, the information contained in the journal article could be biased. And nowadays we have the presence of literary journal, which will actually publish anything if the author paid a fee. So some of the bad data are actually published. And in the pursuit of fair and KPI, sometimes authors publish biased data as well, or incorrect data, or forged data sometimes. So not everything that you encounter in journal article is could be truth. Sometimes it's far from truth. So in this lecture, actually is divided mainly into two parts. In the first part, we are going to identify the structure of original research article and to recognize all the essential components in each section of the original article. So you will actually have an idea what kind of information do you expect to encounter in each sections of the original article. So in the second sections, we are going to understand bias and identify different type of bias in methodology and reporting. Understand why these biases occur and how to avoid them, and to understand each step in critical appraisal journal article. So the first section is about recognizing the sections in original research article, and the second section is identifying bias, and that is the sections where we use a lot of Kahoot as practice. So you may have undergone a lecture of writing original research article, or you have not. You will be in the course in this course, but just as take it as a revisions. The structure of original research article can be divided as such, whereby you encounter title and then the authors and the affiliations, abstract, introduction, methodologies, results, discussion, conclusions, back matters including funding, acknowledgement, conflict of interest, authors' contributions, such. So these are the basic sections of original research article. So when we look at the title article, what are we looking for? Title is actually a balance and summarize. Title should be balanced and also summarize the content of the article concisely. It usually covers the PICO of the study. So do you have any one of you have any idea what is PICO? PICO. What does the abbreviation stand for? Anyone? You are free to unmute and talk. You want to type is okay also. Anyone? Any idea of what's PICO? Anyone? Anyone? Outcome. Yuling said outcome. Yeah, the O is outcome. Population intervention comparator say population intervention comparator outcome. That's correct. Okay. So if possible, the title will cover the four aspects of population intervention comparator outcome. Okay. And also it should not overclaim the finding of the studies. So for example, if you look at the example title here, a randomized control double-blinded clinical trial on the effect of oxyfens on fracture risk among elderly women, does it cover the four areas of PICO? Populations, we have elderly women. Interventions, we have oxyfens. Comparator, we don't usually mention comparator here, but understood that it is a double-blind RCT, so we might have a placebo control, and outcome is fracture risk. So this is a perfect example of how a title encompasses all four areas of PICO. However, not all elements of PICO are necessary in a original research title article. This is because sometimes you have studies which is just observational, there's no interventions. Of course, I will not be there, comparator won't be there. It's just population outcome. Okay. So PICO might not be PICO might best represent all the elements necessary that should be in the title, but depending on the study type, not all elements will be present in PICO. Autism. So why should we concern about autism? So for some of you who are very new and have not written an article before, usually the first and the corresponding authors are the most important in the list of authors in the article. The first authors are usually the students who could be the students who drafted the manuscript and did most of the work. I mean the laboratory work and data collections. And the corresponding author are usually a senior author, a senior researcher who planned the project. And you have co-author, a string of co-author who help in various aspects of the project. Sometimes we look at their affiliation as well to see whether this authors belongs to academic institution or private company. So sometimes when we read an article, we want to know whether they are written by a group of experts in the field. So how do you know they're expert in the field? Again, your any input. How do you know when you read the article? How do you know that this group of people are actually expert in the field? Anyone would like to give their opinion? All through the affiliations, you know that the institution that belongs to are actually expert or not. No, the institution they belong to are actually well known or not. But you're also free to check their research profile. You can Google the individual author, most importantly, the first author and also the last author, to see whether they have a very extensive research profile on that field or the article that you are currently reading. Okay. Just check their research profile in Google Scholars, Scopus Publon, or websites, or their institutional profile to see what have they published previously and whether they have any experience in publishing this field. So, or working on this field. So when you check the first author, sometimes the first author is a student, a new student, master or PhD, who might not have very extensive experience in this field. So I would recommend you to check the corresponding author to check whether they are actually experienced in this field. So we go to abstract is basically a summary of the article, structured or unstructured. In structured abstract, it is divided into subheadings and usually contain background aim, methods, result, and conclusions. In the unstructured abstract, it also contains all these four elements, but there's no subheading and everything's merged into a single paragraph. In the abstract, we are expecting the authors to come up with a research gap to be addressed in the study, an objective of the study. In the method, we are expecting a brief description of methods, result, most notable result in the study, and conclusions would summarize the most important of the findings and generalize the results. So this is an example of structured abstract. You can see that the abstract are divided into four subheadings: background and aim, methods, result, and also conclusions. An unstructured abstract would also contain all these four elements, but they are merged into a single paragraph. Talking about introductions, what do you expect in the introductions of original research article? So these are the 4 or 5 essential elements you will expect in the introductions of article. Firstly, you need to give a brief background on the topic of interest, provide definitions of the problem you are addressing, magnitude of the problem, give examples in various studies on the topic. This could be a brief summary of the study discussed in discussions, and what is the knowledge gap that this study is trying to bridge. And lastly, usually the introduction will end with the objective of the study. So in appraising any research article, these are the four elements you can pay attention to, especially the gap of the studies, whether the authors let the readers know what the gap they are bridging. If there's no gap, then the authors might be just repeating the studies that has been done before. So what you should be aware when reading introductions, are the authors honest about what's known and unknown about a subject or field? Whether they properly identify research gap. Are they too quick to claim novelty to say that this is the first study in the field, this is the first study in the world, and if you do a Google search, this is maybe not the first study in the field or in the world, and is the aim of study properly stated? So in reading the introductions in reading the article in general, sometimes we require the readers to do more than just reading. Maybe you could do a quick search to validate some of the claim of the authors. In materials and methods, we provide detailed experimental procedure to allow replication or study. That's what we, as an author, usually do. We provide subject characteristic, detailed measurements of procedure, details of instrument use, and statistical analysis strategy to allow replications of the study. Usually, a flow of the materials and meta section are written according to a flow of experiments. For example, in an observation study, you have recruitment phase, administration of questionnaire, some collections to lab tests to statistical analysis. And then studies your treatment of animals, harvest a sample, lab tests and statistical analysis. And cell culture study, you have culturing and treatment of cells, harvest samples, lab tests and statistical analysis. This is what you usually do, following what you usually do in the lab or in your field work. In the result, usually authors report the outcome of experiment objectively and concisely. Quantitative results are usually illustrated in figures and tables, and this is where you need to actually assess whether the study reported in text and study reported in figures are actually tally to each other. In the reporting, we are expecting the authors to use unit of measurement, standardized unit of measurements. So for example, unit measurement, we follow the intentional system of unit. Biological species, we use nomenclature and taxonomy. Drugs, we use generic name. Chemical compound, we use IUPAC name. And also when they claim significance, the authors are requested to provide value of significance, which is the p-value. In discussions, sections will give the opportunity for the authors to explain their findings. The authors are expected to compare and contrast their finding with previous studies to find out the similarities and the discrepancy of the finding of this study you are reading with the previous studies. When there are discrepancy between the current finding and the previous studies, the authors are expected to offer some explanations, and this depends on the source of variations. Could be the instruments, could be the study design, could be the subject. And sometimes we discussion offer the authors to clarify the explanation, the mechanism of actions. Let's say if you are doing pharmacology studies, this is where you can actually explain the mechanism of action on drug on diseases or pathogenesis of the drugs. In every discussion, we're also expecting limitations. The author be honest to declare the limitation of the study. Limitations are anything that prevent the generalizations of your results. For example, non-randomized sampling technique, or any biases that occur, any confounding factors that you have not collected in your studies. After coming out of limitation, of course, the authors are expected to recommend any step that could be done to improve the studies. For example, the author could further characterize the molecular pathway of pathogenesis of diseases or the action of drugs. And sometimes we end the discussion with no the clinical significance of the report of the study, just to remind why the readers are spending time reading the article. In conclusion, this provides space for the authors to generalize the findings and offer suggestions. For example, here, the red highlighted part is actually the summary of findings, and usually is followed by a recommendations on how readers can actually use these information in real life, or how the authority could use the information to further promote health. Back matters. Why should we be concerned about back matters? So back matters will declare funding of the project. So it is maybe necessary for you to scrutinize the funding of a project so that you know it's partly funded or publicly funded. Usually publicly funded projects are less susceptible to biases, and privately funded projects sometimes you wonder whether the authors are biased to generate positive results. Okay, and acknowledgements, you see who are the sponsored individual who have contributed to the study. If a private company are involved, sometimes you'll be alert whether they have any influence on the outcome studies or design outcome studies. Conflict interests. So this is where the authors declare any factors that could potentially influence the result of studies. So for example, if any of the authors are consultant or drug company, have a significant share of the company, sometimes you wonder that whether this result generated could be influenced by financial interests involved. For example, if I'm doing vitamin E and bond, and if in a conflict of interest, I declare that I'm the shareholder of vitamin E company. So you'll be wondering whether I'm generating positive result to promote the sale of my vitamin E of my company. Okay. So all of this could lead to biases in studies. And author's contributions, it declare the role of each author in study and manuscript preparations. So references, relevant references must be cited, must be up to date, and beware of self-citations by the authors. Sometimes we want to promote a hash index, so the authors could cite their own article excessively. Okay, so you can check the references to make sure that they are relevant and the authors do not commit self-citation excessively, meaning that they cite everything about the article, regardless if it's relevant or not. So these are the biases of, these are biases. These are the basic structure of original research article. So to most of you, maybe it's quite common knowledge. I'm just refreshing you what are things that you can pay attention to identify the potential biases or potential limitations of any original research article that you are reading. So another part of assessing a critical appraisal of original research article, original studies actually is to identify biases. Biases are something very subtle. Authors will not tell you directly that there are biases in their studies. Okay, first thing, you should know what is biases. Biases are systematic deviations of the true state of nature. Okay, systematic deviation for true state. Maybe it's quite, how do I say, abstract for you, the definitions. But if I ask you, let's say, if you know that your body weight is 60 kg and presented in front of you are two brand new weighing scale. You step on weighing scale A, and the weighing scale show your body weight to be 60.1, second reading 59.9, third reading 60.2, fourth reading 59.8. So you realize that the readings switch between the left and right side of your true reading, which is 60 kg. You are very confirmed that you are 60 kg. So this actually highlight the imprecisions of the machines. Okay, this could be random errors, and this error have no direction. It's switched between left and right. So and you set on weighing scale B, and then you realize that whenever you set on weighing scale B, the the reading always shows 60.1, 60.2, 60.1, 60.2. We realize that the error are quite directional. It always switch to the more side. Okay, it's always switch to the left-right side of the true reading. And this is a directional error, systematic error. It's very directional. And this could be bias. Okay, this is not due to random error of the machines. This is due to the fault of the machines. They're creating bias in the measurements. So this is the difference between bias and also random error. Any questions so far regarding bias and random error? Okay. So random errors usually determined by the statistical significance. It's influenced by sample size. It can be accessed using statistical tests used reporting of p-value marginal errors. For bias, they are usually, you can access bias in the methodology and meta sections, okay? It is usually committed during data collections or data analysis. Why does bias occur? Usually it occurs because of lack of randomizations of the subject, lack of blinding or assessor, the use of unrepresentative sample or subject, and the disease is very hard to diagnose or classify. There's error in the disease diagnosis and also classifications. So now we are going to switch to Kahoot. So if you have not logged into Kahoot, please log in now, okay? Oh, most of you have exited the Kahoot. So please re-enter the Kahoot now. Let me see how many people are we expecting. I'll be expecting over 24 people, okay? 24 people in the Kahoot sections. Please log in using your student ID if possible. 11 people, 12 people. Please log in as soon as possible. I'll give you another 5 minutes to log in. Once you log in, don't refresh. When you refresh, you'll be out. So in this Kahoot section, we are going to assess whether you are able to identify bias in certain scenario. It's commonly encountered in studies. Again, when you encounter this scenario in the original research article, the author will not tell you that there are bias occurring. So it's up to the readers to identify whether you can spot the bias or not. So we have 16 people now, 17 people, 18. Please log in as soon as possible. We are going to start in maybe 2-3 minutes time. If you can go through these Kahoot sections, it may help you to answer the quizzes and to understand the type of biases. Maybe another 1 minute, and then we're going to start the Kahoot sections. For those of you who feel left out and maybe some connection problem, you can always join in the middle of sections. 19, 18, can we reach 20? Can we have 20 people? At least 20? No. I understand that some of you might not have a second gadget, so you have a connection problems, so you're not joining, but let's try to learn something from these Kahoot sections. So we are going to start now. So first question, do you believe everything published in the journal article? Should you or do you believe everything, all the data published in the journal article? Okay, so some of you say yes. You so for those of you who are not familiar with Kahoot, this is the time for you to get familiar with. So most of you say you are total skeptic, and two of you say you are on the fence. Sometimes you can buy, sometimes you buy it, sometimes you don't buy it. But our recommendation is to you is that read it with a grain of salt, meaning that don't take everything by surface value. Okay, you are always welcome to, how do I say, to question all the data that you read in a journal article. So in the bone health studies, Subjects were recruited conveniently at the hospital lobby. Do you think there's a bias here? You might not be familiar with the terminology, with the definition of bias. That's okay. Just try your luck. And we are going to explain each type of bias later. So most of you answer selection bias, which is correct. And some of you answer volunteer bias, which is also correct. Survivor bias, not so much, and no bias at all is not correct, of course. So when subjects are being recruited conveniently at the hospital lobby, they may not represent the general populations that you encounter. Okay, if you recruit a subject systematically outside and subject you conveniently recruited at the hospital lobby, they are different. Okay, so selection bias occurs here because the subject recruited at the lobby is different from the general populations. You could imagine a subject recruited at hospital lobby that could be sick. Okay, they could be of lower health status. Okay. However, there might also be volunteer bias, whereby subjects who all volunteer for health screening are usually very health conscious, and they might be more healthier than the general populations. So usually this is what we call volunteer bias because those volunteers who offer themselves the health screening are probably healthier than the general populations. Okay, so there are two possible kind of bias occurring here, which is selection bias, different selection of subjects different from general populations, and volunteer bias, whereby subject or volunteer for screening are better health than the general populations. In a national health study, 50% of the subjects are from Klang Valley, the rest from other part of West Malaysia. So in the so-called national health studies, more than 50% or 50% of subjects are from Klang Valley alone, and the rest are from other part of West Malaysia. Do you think is there bias here? Do you think? Okay, so there is a selection bias, of course, similar to the study just now. In a national health study, in the Malaysian and nationwide studies, we are expecting the study to cover all the states of Malaysia. It's not just West Malaysia. It should cover all the states of Malaysia, okay, according to the population's distributions in each state. However, in these studies, most of the subjects are from Klang Valley alone, and the rest of subjects are from West Malaysia and East Malaysia are not covered. So it is not fair to claim it as a national health studies. Okay, so selection bias occur here because the subjects selected do not represent the general population of Malaysia. So not so much on volunteer bias. We are not talking about volunteer now, and classification bias refer to misclassification of diseases, which has nothing to do in the scenario given here. So, in biological term, usually chronic inflammation increases with age. However, the nonagenarians, which is people above 90 years old, in a study have lower inflammation compared to younger subjects. What kind of bias could have occurred here? Survivor bias. Oh, you guys are smart. Okay. So, in the general populations, indeed, chronic inflammation increase with age. So if you access the general populations up to, let's say, 50, 60 years old, you see a trend that inflammation status increases with age, regardless of disease status. However, those who have survived until 90 years old, which is more than the mean life expectancy in Malaysia or in the world, they have lower inflammation. This is because survivor bias. These nonagenarians are not the usual populations. They have maybe mutations. They have better physiological response against inflammations than the rest of the populations. That's why they survive until 90 years old, more than the expected life expectancy in Malaysia or the rest of the world. And they have lower inflammation that's related to their prolonged health. Okay, so this is what we call survivor bias. Those who survive a traumatic incidents or those who survive until the very end of their life are actually very different from the rest of the populations. So they cannot be equated with the general populations due to their special status. This is called survivor bias. Or given another example, for example, you put two group of patients, one through a very invasive surgery and the other group through a less invasive surgery. However, you notice that those that has been put through a very invasive surgery have better outcome compared to those who have been put through a low risk surgery. You'll be very you'll be very surprised. How come those who have been put through a very invasive surgery have better outcome? And later when you look back at the selection of subject, you realize that actually those who have been put through invasive surgery are those who are deemed to have better health, and those who have been put through the low risk surgery are subject or patient who have greater risk of dying. That's why they are being put through the low risk surgery. After low risk surgery, they eventually die, and those with greater health who have been put through invasive surgery, they survive the surgery and survive better later, because maybe because of their better health and maybe because they are younger. And this is one form of survivor bias as well. Okay. Anyway, guys, you are free to to unmute yourself and ask any questions you have if you don't understand. Okay. So bone mineral density by X-ray is the gold standard to diagnose osteoporosis. But our study uses qualitative ultrasound instead to diagnose osteoporosis in their study. Bone mineral density is the gold standard to diagnose osteoporosis, but in the study they use quantitative ultrasound instead. What could be the bias committed here? And most of you answer correctly, which is misclassification bias. So in the study to diagnose a disease, if we are not using the gold standards, there will be variations. Okay. Okay, so you might misdiagnose study, meaning that you might classify subject having a disease as non-disease subject. In other words, in another case, you might also misclassify normal subject as having a disease because you are not using a gold standard. So misclassification could occur. Okay. Again, author might not inform you of the risk of misclassification in their study. Okay, and this you have to realize yourself. The doctors who are in charge of clinical trial are not blinded to a grouping of subject. What kind of bias could have occurred here? The doctors who are in charge of clinical trial are not blinded to grouping of subject. So some of you answer performance bias, which is correct, and some of you answer detection bias, which is correct as well. Okay, nothing to do with correct selection bias because we have not touched on the detailed subject. So performance bias, what is performance bias? So let's say the doctor are treating the subject and he know that this subject is under treatment and this subject is under placebo. He or she might treat the subject or patients under treatment with greater care and love compared to those in the placebo group because they know and they desire the patient under treatment to perform better compared to patients under placebo. So greater treatment, greater attention, greater care might be showered on patients under treatment compared to patients under placebo if if the attending doctor know that which group of subject are receiving which kind of treatment. So these are called performance bias. What about detection bias? So let's say a doctor is measuring the blood pressure of subject participating in antihypertensive trial. So doctor know that this subject is under treatment, and then he put the cuff on and measure the blood pressure of subject. He measure one time at quite high. Maybe you are a bit how do I say nervous, so measure second time, bit high. Measure third time, okay, low. So this time I'll take the low reading because just now maybe you are you are nervous, being measured, and also maybe you are running just now. So I'll take the measure. I know that you're in treatment, so your blood pressure should be low now. So I'll take the third reading only because it's supposed to be low. And then he measure the subject under placebo. Measure one time high. Okay, high lah. It's okay. You are supposed to be high because you're not being treated. So I'll accept the high reading. So this is the detection bias that could occur if the doctors are not blinded to a grouping of subject. Okay, it sounds very biased, it sounds very unprofessional. Okay, however, doctors are human also, and this kind of biases could occur. The vitamin D supplementation study, the treatment group have a higher body weight compared to the placebo group. What kind of biases could have occurred? So errors in randomizations. Mm, yeah, errors in randomizations. The major error, the most correct answer with errors in randomization, there could be some element in selection bias as well, whereby the selected placebo group is inherently different from a treatment group. But mainly it could be error in randomization. The two groups are not matched in terms of body weight. Why would body weight, equal body weight be so essential in this trial? It is because vitamin D is a lipid-soluble vitamin. So if the group have different body weight, the one with a higher body weight might the excess adipose tissue might keep the vitamin D in the adipose tissue and it's not being circulated in the blood, which is not good for the trial or the result of the trial. So mainly this could be a errors subject not being randomized correctly based on body weight, based on essential confounding factors. Rats in group A keep dying post-treatment. The researcher add the rats group until it's the same as placebo, and they never declare it in the paper. So the rat in the group A, in the treatment group, keep dying after treatment. So what the researchers do that keep adding back rats into group until it's the same as equal group at the end of experiments. It is called attrition bias. Okay. This is called attrition bias because although in the end maybe the treatment A is effective in reversing certain disease, but it's also very toxic. Okay, so if you do not report the fate of the rat being subjected to treatment A, that many of it have died, then you are keeping the safety of the drug from the attention, from the scrutiny of the readers. So this is attrition bias. So similarly in a randomized control trial, the authors are compelled to tell you the fate of the subject, how many subjects have withdrawn in the treatment group and also in the placebo group. And you notice that there are significantly more subjects in the treatment group the short attrition in studies, that means that the withdrawal from studies, you might want to ask what is the reason, and usually the authors have to state the reason why to subject at short attritions in certain arm. Is it because of side effect? If there's a lot of side effect, you might be concerned on the safety of the drug. Okay, so this attrition bias. What is your favorite movie genre? So this is just free for all questions, and it's a cue for me to go back to my slide. I'm a horror fan. I like horror very much. I'm not sure about you. Oh, most of you like sci-fi, which is good because you're a researcher, is it? Okay. Horror scored second, which is good. So I'm just going to go back to the presentation slide. So these are some example biases that we have encountered during our Kahoot quiz. Selection biases, whereby there are systemic differences in the baseline characteristic between control and treatment. Performance biases, systematic difference in care provided between group. Detection bias, systematic difference in assessing the outcome between the groups. Attrition bias, systematic difference in the withdrawal between the groups. Volunteer bias, subjects who volunteer to participate in a research project are different in some way from the general populations. Survivor bias, data set only consider surviving or existing observations and fail to consider observations that already cease to exist. Those already died, okay? And misclassification biases, systematic error of assigning individual to a different category than the one to which they should be assigned. Okay, so we have explained some of the biases using example that we encountered in our quiz just now. So how do we avoid biases in the planning of the studies actually? So we should select appropriate study design in vitro and also in vivo. We should also randomize subject animals. We should also set up appropriate recruitment criteria, so to make sure that our selected subject are similar to the general populations as close as possible. Assessor should be blinded in a study, blinded of treatment, and sample size correlation, appropriate sample size correlation should be applied. All the instrument used should be appropriate and validated. This should be the gold standard in measurements. And we should provide sufficient detail to ensure the results are replicable by another research group. This include experimental conditions, precision of measurements of the instruments, validity of the instruments, name, batch number, and manufacture of the kits and machines used, so that other people have a chance to really replicate our studies. Sometimes bias in data reporting could occur. Why does it occur? And this is because researchers are pressured to get significant results, pressured to publish positive findings because very hard to publish negative findings. And this could be due to certain interests of the authors, because they want to graduate very fast. They want to gain some commercial, also personal fame from the study. That's why sometimes they manipulate data or fabricate data to get positive findings. So how do we identify biases in data analysis and also interpretations? What are some examples? We'll go back to Kahoot quiz just now. I hope you're still there. Make sure that you're still in the Kahoot quiz, huh? And we'll continue with Kahoot. Is it okay to replace missing value with mean value? Let's say you have 6 rats each group, and then there are some rats that have missing value, so you replace the missing value with a group mean value. Is it okay? So the answer is actually it depends. Uh, it is sometimes it's okay if your subgroup is very precious and you have good assumption that the missing value could be replaced with the mean value. Sometimes it can. Okay, but you need to discuss this with your supervisor to see whether it's okay or not. But for the example that I said to you just now, whereby you only have 6 in each group, and then it's okay to just replace it. Sometimes it may not, okay, because it influences the data so much. You influence the error bar of your chart, and that actually influences significance. But let's say you have a very large epidemiological data set, and some subgroup are quite precious. There are some significant missing value there. It may be, in certain circumstances, it may be acceptable to accept replacing the missing value with the mean value. Of course, you have to declare what you have done in the manuscript you are writing. Okay, but it is very circumstantial. You need to discuss with with your co-researcher, and you need to declare it in the manuscript. Trimming data to get a better regression line. Is it okay? So if you are doing a regression studies, so it's a line, and then you just want to trim some outlier out so that you get a better regression line. Is it okay? Again, my recommendation that sometimes we do that, especially with a large epidemiological data. We trim the data to get a better regression line because some of the outliers, influential cases, might influence our line, deviate our line from the norm for the normal expected line. Okay, so in that kind of situation, sometimes we do trim the outlier out so that we'll get a better regression line that fit the general populations. Okay, but again, why do you trim? How do you trim? How many percent of data has been trimmed out or eliminated to get the best line? You have to declare it in your manuscript. Okay, the rationale of trimming, how many percent have been trimmed, you should declare in your how do I say, in your manuscript so that readers are much aware. Replacing data to get statistical significance, do you think it's okay? You want the two group difference to be statistical difference, so you replace some data purposefully to get statistical significance. Yes, you cannot. By doing that, you are fabricating data. You are fabricating data in getting statistical significance is not acceptable in any kind of circumstances. Again, this is just a cue for me to go back to the slide. I wish all the following is not Marvel superhero. Just to test whether you are watching superhero movies. The answer is Wonder Woman. No, you guys actually answer most of it answer wrongly. Wolverine is still Marvel, it's X-Men, but it's still Marvel. So let's get back to the bias. So some of the bias that you will encounter during data analysis and interpretations is actually data fabrications, whereby the authors actually falsify research data. Okay, data trimming, where the author actually removes certain data to get the expected results. P-fishing or data mining, whereby they fish the entire data set looking for correlations at p-value less than 0.05 and report this correlation significant without proper theoretical support. Actually, a lot of people are doing that. So an inflated type 2 error, they're using accurate statistical tests to analyze results, and this will inflate type 2 errors. Okay, so fabrications of data or manipulation of data are quite hard to notice. Actually, it's very, very hard to notice for a reader. Some of the famous cases, including you see that authors use modified images in representing data, and that can be spotted easily. Sometimes the very meticulous readers can spot it, and they will report to a journal. And when you notice that some of the group have, let's say you are looking at bar chart, some of the group have extremely small error bar, and this is indications of mean replacements actually. When you replace mean, the error bar will shrink. So there could be some data trimming or mean replacements occurring there. You want to be careful. So these things are very subtle, and the authors might not announce it in their reports. Okay. So step to avoid bias in data analysis reporting: be honest, report all findings, negative and positive, avoid data mining, report limitations, and provide a fair comparison of previous studies which support against your current finding, and avoid overgeneralization or overclaim of results. Next, bias and publications. So journals tend to publish articles with negative result. Why? So because authors submit only positive findings. They want to hide negative results. Sponsor want to hide negative results. They don't want a study with negative results to come out. And editor are biased towards negative result. They only want to publish and select a positive result because they are highest chance of the study of the studies or the publication to be cited. There are some impact of this practice towards science, but how would only publishing negative positive result impact science in general? Anyone want to give some opinion? You can type or you can voice out opinion. How would publishing only positive result impact science in general? Anyone of you want to try? No, that's okay. But usually, if you don't disclose a negative result, not just too positive, but if you only disclose a negative result, then some other people will repeat your negative findings, will try another studies and repeat your negative findings, and this is such a waste of time and resources. Already, you know that it's not going to work, but you don't tell other people. So other people are going to spend money and time to invest in the same study design and get a negative result again. If they don't disclose again, the other people will try again. So this is not very healthy actually. I'm not sure whether I still a Kahoot or not. Oh, there are still more Kahoot on the actually on this thing. A was marginally different from B. This is how authors. Oh, let's try to influence interpretation studies. So you have p-value very close to 0.05, but still more than 0.05. And you use sentences like, authors use sentences like, it was marginally different, marginally correlated, something like that. Is it okay? And this is not okay actually in scientific writing. It creates confusions. Is really significant or not? It's like in actual fact it's not significant, but you are using words like this to confuse your readers. This represents a certain degree of wishful thinking in part of the authors. You wish that it is significant, but it's not. So you use something like this to confuse your readers. A was associated with B in cross-section studies, so A cost B. So it is a cross-section studies, and A was associated with B factor. So we claim that A cos B. Can we do that? You cannot, okay? You cannot. This is because cross-sectional study cannot explain cause and effect. Okay, only experimental study can explain cause and effect. Usually, cross-sectional study we cannot explain cause and effect. It's something causally related. Okay, but it's not causal. You cannot explain cause and effect. So, A might be linked with B in a cross-sectional study, but A do not cause B. They are just associated, but you cannot say they are A which cause which directions. So if we encounter such a circumstances whereby it is just observation studies and the authors say A cause B, again it is over interpretations and is certain degree of visual thinkingness from the authors. A causes a significant reduction in blood pressure, so X is effective drug and they are hypertensive. So X causes a significant reduction in blood pressure from 160 to 175 with p-value significant. So X is a very effective drug, antihypertensive drugs. Are we okay to call that? So most of you say can't, okay? But in actual fact, you cannot, okay? Because if you look at the reductions of blood pressure, 160 mmHg to 157 mmHg, the reduction is not clinically significant. It's still hypertensive. It's from one hypertensive to another hypertensive. It's not reduction until non-hypertensive. So although they use maybe a lot of subject causing the p-value to be significant, but in actual fact, the how do I say the clinical conditions of the patient does not improve. They are still hypertensive. So you cannot claim it to be effective clinically. It may be statistically significant, but it's not effective clinically. So again, if you encounter a situation like this is over interpretations, the using statistical significance and try to translate it into clinical significance. %50 of the subject for Klang Valley have vitamin D deficiency, so it is a major problem in Malaysia. Can you say something like that? No, 50% of the subject of Klang Valley have vitamin D deficiency, so yeah, it is a major problem in Malaysia. You cannot? Why do you think you cannot? Anyone want to give an opinion why you cannot say that? Anyone want to unmute yourself and explain to me why you can't say
Because
that?
it doesn't represent the whole country.
No, you're correct. Yes, you're so correct.
But
So
I answer, well, it depends. So obviously,
okay. Yeah, so this is over interpretation, over generalizations, whereby you only recruit subject from Klang Valley and then you try to generalize it to the whole Malaysia, which is not really correct. Okay, so the locality is just Klang Valley. So during interpretations, or mostly in the conclusions, you can say that it is, yeah, it may be a major problem in Klang Valley, but to generalize this finding to the entire Malaysia, we might have to extend the study to recruit the whole Malaysian populations. Right now, you can't generalize it to the whole Malaysian population. This is a form of overgeneralizations, which is very common in scientific articles. So this is something that you must be aware of also. Lastly, which is your favorite music band? To me, I can't actually differentiate between individual members of BTS or Blackpink or yes, I don't know. I don't know that. I can't tell them apart. So I'll choose the fourth options. Most of you are like me, okay. that will be the end of Kahoot actually. So congratulations to those who score very well. Congratulations. So for those of you who score very well, hope you score equally well in the how do I say quiz in the UCAN folio. Okay. Basically, you score very well in the UCAN folio quiz, you can lecture, you can pass your research method class lah. Okay. But thank you for participating in the Kahoot quiz. I hope through the quiz you understand the lecture a bit better. So for your checklist or journal appraisal, these are some of the things that you can actually look at. Okay, if you ever had time to read a journal article, but these are some of the things you can actually look at critically. The introductions, whether it highlight the problem and research gap to be addressed, and it indicate the objective and hypothesis of the study. So why do we need the hypothesis? Because the reason to do a studies should be hypothesis driven. There should be scientific rationale to do a studies. Just saying that no one had done that before is not enough in this age. Okay, it should be hypothesis driven. Methodology, whether the authors have used appropriate study design to address the questions you want to address, whether there are adequate sample size calculations, whether detailed experiments are reported and replicable, and whether appropriate statistical tests have been used to analyze the results. Result, whether it is logical interpretation of data, whether they are hidden data, whereby the procedure of measuring the data are mentioned, but the data are not reported. This is some form of hidings. Okay, you might wonder why the authors do not want to disclose the full data. For example, if I know that the author run a full blood count, I know that RBC will be there, white blood cell will be there, differential count will be there, and then in the result, only the red blood cell parameters are reported. And then you might wonder, what happened to white blood cell count? Why is it not reported? Yeah, something like that. Discussion whether there are fair comparison with the previous studies, both positive and negative, whether there are logical reasoning for the observations, and whether the authors are honest about the limitation of studies and novelties of studies. Conclusion, make sure there are fair summary of the findings and there are sensible recommendations. And when the authors are generalizing their results, it is reasonable. Okay, so one example of the over generalizations is the example I've given to you, whereby they only recruit subject in Klang Valley and they generalize the whole Malaysia, which is not correct. Okay, conflict of interest. Do the author have commercial interest in the study? Do they hold share employment with the sponsor company, whether they are being paid to do the studies, things like that, that could influence the result of the study. Funding, if private funders are involved, do they have commercial interest in the studies, and whether they have any role in planning and data analysis. And this is something you should be very aware of, whether the sponsor or the funder have any role in planning and also analyzing the results. And those interests can influence the study design and also interpretation of the results. References again, check is updated, recent 5 years or 10 years, landmark study are cited, and whether are relevant. Other authors are self-citing for the sake of self-citing without any rationale. Most importantly, at the end of this lecture, I just want you to know that humans are inherently imperfect. The authors, the reviewers, editors, the readers also. Okay, so we should be aware of the bias in literature because bias are very subtle in literature. You might not notice it. Okay, you are not read with a very critical mind. Okay, so these are some quality appraiser tool when you are reading how do I say different study types. Okay, they will help you to how do I say recognize whether the authors have reported what he or she should be reporting and whether they'll help you to this tool will help you to recognize whether there are chances of biases occurring in the studies. Okay, So this is my references. Thank you.